They mocked humanity across the galaxy. Until we fought back in the vast expanse of the galaxy, Earth was a small, insignificant world, viewed with disdain by the more powerful alien species that ruled the stars. For centuries, humanity had been a mere curiosity, a young race on a small planet that was barely considered a blip in the galaxy's grand design. The alien empires looked upon Earth with a mix of amusement and pity, seeing the human race as weak and primitive. The galaxy's most advanced species, the cold and calculating Vornik, the proud and superior Zelarians, and the mysterious, ancient Harkali, mocked humanity. At every opportunity, they made it clear that humans had no place in the grand order of the universe. They were nothing more than a fleeting presence, barely worth noticing. To these aliens, Earth's inhabitants were nothing more than a simple species that had managed to survive through sheer luck, without any true strength to claim. And so, when the Galactic Summit convened to discuss the future of the known universe, it was expected that the humans would be treated with the same indifference they always had been. Representatives of each alien race took their seats at the council table, and as the meeting began, the mockery started. The Zelarian leader, a towering figure named Vaoler, was the first to speak. His voice was deep and resonant, filled with an almost condescending warmth as he addressed the room. Humanity, a species that has barely advanced beyond the rudimentary stages of technology, believes it can contribute to the future of the galaxy. How quaint, he chuckled, the sound echoing through the chamber. The Harkali emissary, a shadowy figure with skin that seemed to shimmer like liquid night, spoke next. Indeed, I recall seeing the humans' attempts to venture into space. They cannot even protect their own planet from natural disasters, let alone from galactic threats. Their pathetic attempts to harness energy from the stars are laughable at best. The room buzzed with agreement as the other delegates nodded, some exchanging amused glances. The Vornik representative, a calculating individual named Torsken, added his voice to the chorus. Humanity is not worthy of our time. Their limited understanding of the universe only serves to hinder the progress of the galaxy. It would be better for all if they remained confined to their tiny world, isolated and irrelevant. The words stung deeply. The humans, who had fought to survive countless challenges, both natural and man-made, were now openly mocked by those they had once hoped to join in the greater community of the galaxy. But it was not just the words that cut the deepest, it was the certainty in the aliens' voices. To them, Earth was a mistake that would eventually correct itself, like an experiment gone wrong. They saw no value in humanity and made no effort to hide their contempt. On Earth, the transmission of the summit reached millions of homes. The faces of the alien leaders flashed across screens worldwide, their words echoing in every corner of the planet. The mockery was clear, the insults obvious. It was a message sent to all of humanity. You do not belong, you are insignificant. As humans watched, anger began to build. For too long, humanity had been silent in the face of galactic arrogance. But now, something had shifted. People across the world, from the poorest corners to the most powerful governments, felt a spark of defiance. The time for being humiliated was over. Among them was Captain Elias Kincaid, a military strategist who had been following the events closely. He sat in his small office, watching the summit unfold on a hollow screen, his face grim. He had seen the same mocking tones and gestures before in various forms, but today was different. Today, humanity was being pushed too far. Elias was not a man of great power or wealth, but he had always believed in the potential of humankind. His ancestors had fought to build a world out of nothing, to carve out a place among the stars. It was that same belief in humanity's strength that had driven him to become a strategist in the Earth military, where he had spent years studying the stars, the alien technologies, and the weaknesses in the galactic power structure. As the mocking continued, Elias stood up from his desk, his fists clenched. He could hear the words of the alien leaders in his mind, their laughter ringing in his ears. You are nothing. You cannot compare to us. You do not belong. But in that moment, Elias made a decision. The time for sitting idly by had passed. If humanity wanted a place in this galaxy, they would have to fight for it, and they would not fight alone. Elias spent the next few days in seclusion, working with a small group of trusted scientists and engineers. He knew that Earth had been underestimated for far too long. While the galaxy's superpowers flaunted their advanced technology, humanity had something they didn't: determination. The human spirit could never be crushed, no matter how hard they tried. The first step was simple, to show the galaxy that humanity could defend itself. But the challenge was immense. The alien species that mocked them had technologies far beyond anything humans had ever dreamed of. To even stand a chance, they would need to turn the tables, to use the same technology that had been used against them, and in some cases, use it better. And that meant taking risks, developing their own weapons, and forging alliances where none had existed before. But Ilias knew that the key to success was not just in advanced weaponry. It was in strategy. He began to plan in secret, assembling a team of military experts, engineers, and scientists who would work to create a new weapon, something that would give humanity the edge. The Eclipse device, a powerful piece of technology that could allow humanity to strike anywhere in the galaxy without warning. It would be humanity's first step toward showing the galaxy that they could not be ignored, that they were a force to be reckoned with. The device was not just about power, it was about precision. With it, humanity could make an impact where it mattered most. It could strike against the very heart of the alien empires, showing them that humanity was no longer weak, no longer insignificant. And it would send a message across the galaxy. You mocked us, but now we are ready to fight back. But as the first steps toward this new age of resistance began, Ilias understood that the hardest battle lay ahead. The galaxy would not easily accept a shift in the balance of power. The alien species would not simply step aside and allow humanity to take its place. But Ilias was determined. He knew that humanity had only one chance to prove itself. And he would make sure that they did. The days following the summit were filled with uncertainty, but also a sense of determination. Captain Ilias Kincaid and his team worked relentlessly, planning and building in secret while the rest of humanity absorbed the insults. Every corner of Earth had felt the sting of the galaxy's disdain, and people everywhere were beginning to wonder if they would ever be taken seriously. They had never imagined that their own survival would one day depend on their ability to stand up to such a vast, powerful universe. But for Ilias, there was no question. Humanity would fight back, and they would not be crushed by the mocking words of arrogant aliens. Every insult, every sneer only fueled his resolve. If the galaxy thought humans were weak, they were in for a rude awakening. He and his team had begun to work on the Eclipse device, a secret weapon that would change everything. The technology, scavenged from downed alien ships and modified with Earth's own ingenuity, had the potential to shift the balance of power. It was a device that could manipulate space-time, allowing human ships to move across vast distances in an instant, catching their enemies off guard. The key was precision. Humanity had no fleet as large as the alien empires, but they had something better: surprise and the will to use it. As the team worked on perfecting the Eclipse device, Ilias knew that they could not afford to wait for the perfect moment. The galaxy had already underestimated them for far too long. He needed to act fast, and he needed a target. The Vornik, an alien species known for their cold and ruthless nature, seemed like the perfect place to start. The Vornik were an ancient species, their empire spanning vast sections of the galaxy. They had long ago conquered many worlds, crushing anyone who dared to stand in their way. Their technology was advanced, and their military forces were formidable. But Ilias had studied them closely. The Vornik were proud and arrogant, and they had never expected humanity to pose a threat. It was exactly this arrogance that would lead to their downfall. The first strike would be subtle. Ilias knew that a direct confrontation would not work. The human fleet was still too small, too untested. But if they could make the Vornik believe that humans were capable of something far more dangerous, something that could strike from anywhere without warning, it would be enough to shake them. The Eclipse device could be the key to proving that humans were not to be underestimated. Ilias and his team worked through the nights, perfecting the device and gathering the resources needed for the first strike. They knew they would need to act quickly. The galaxy was not going to wait for humanity to catch up, and if they didn't make their move soon, they risked being forgotten forever. The operation was set into motion. Using the Eclipse device, a small human force of warships was able to move across the galaxy undetected, taking the Vornik completely by surprise. The target, a small but important Vornik outpost on a distant planet, one that had been involved in exploiting resources from human colonies on nearby planets. It was a simple target, but the symbolic importance was massive. If humanity could strike at the heart of the Vornic Empire, it would show that they were not the weak, helpless species that everyone thought they were. The attack was swift and precise. The Vornic never saw it coming. By the time they realized what had happened, the human forces were already on the retreat, having destroyed the outpost and left behind nothing but wreckage. The news spread quickly across the galaxy. Humanity had struck back, and they had done so with overwhelming force. The Vornic were stunned, unsure of how to react. They had never imagined that the humans, so far behind in technology and military strength, could ever be a threat. And yet they had just been bested in a battle they hadn't even known they were fighting. For humanity, the victory was more than just a tactical success. It was a message to the Vornic, to the Zelarians, to the Harkali, and to anyone who had ever mocked them. We are not weak. We are not insignificant. We will fight back. It was the beginning of something much larger, a movement that would echo through the stars. Humans were no longer content to be pushed around. They would take their place in the galaxy, and they would do so on their own terms. Back on Earth, the reaction was mixed. Some celebrated the victory as a symbol of humanity's potential, a sign that they could hold their own in a galaxy of advanced species. But there were others who feared what this meant. Some believed that humanity was opening a door that could never be closed, a door that would lead to war with the alien empires. But Elias knew there was no going back. He had made his choice, and now humanity had to stand together or they would fall. The victory over the Vornic was only the beginning. Elias knew that much more was at stake than just one battle. The galaxy would not simply allow humanity to rise without a fight. The other alien empires would take notice, and they would respond. The question was, how would humanity face them? Would they fight with the same determination that had propelled them to this point, or would they falter under the pressure of the galaxy's scrutiny? As the days passed, Elias and his team began preparing for the next phase. The Eclipse device was still their greatest weapon, but they knew it would not be enough to win the war. They needed more than just a weapon. They needed to build alliances, to unite the scattered factions of humanity, and to create a force that could stand against the galactic powers. But it was a daunting task. The galaxy was vast, and the alien empires were far more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced. But Elias was not one to back down. He had seen the potential in humanity, the strength that lay hidden beneath the surface of their small, isolated world. He had witnessed firsthand the power of human ingenuity, the unyielding spirit that had carried them through wars, disasters, and near extinction. And now, he would use that strength to build a future for humanity in the stars. The battle for humanity's place in the galaxy had only just begun, and Elias Kinkade, the news of humanity's first victory over the Vornic, spread like wildfire across the galaxy. It was an unexpected blow to the alien empire, and it shook them to their core. The once dismissed humans had struck a decisive blow against a superior power, and now the galaxy was watching. The Vornic were not used to being challenged, let alone by a species they had considered beneath them. The shockwaves from this event rippled outward, sparking fear and curiosity among the galaxy's most powerful species. Back on Earth, the victory had reignited something in the human spirit. For years, humanity had been mocked, pushed aside, and dismissed by the larger galactic powers. But now, they had shown that they were capable of more than anyone had expected. The celebration was short-lived, though. Elias Kinkade knew that a single victory was not enough to change the galaxy's perception of humanity. There were still many challenges ahead. The Vornic would not forgive the humiliation easily, and other alien empires would certainly take notice. As Elias sat in his command center, surrounded by his trusted team of scientists, engineers, and military leaders, he could feel the weight of what was to come. The Eclipse device had given humanity the upper hand for now, but it would not be enough to win the war. If humanity were to stand a chance, they needed to build on this victory. They needed to unite, not just with each other, but with other species who were willing to fight for their freedom. Elias knew that it was time to take the next step. The Vornic would regroup, and the Zelarians, Harkali, and other alien powers would no longer underestimate humanity. He began to form alliances with other rebellious factions, offering them the same technology that had given humanity the edge in the first battle. The goal was clear: create a coalition of species who were tired of being controlled by the alien empires and willing to fight for a new order. The first of these alliances came from a surprising source. The Zelarians, a proud and powerful species, were often considered the most arrogant of all the galactic powers. They saw themselves as the rulers of the stars, superior in every way to the lesser species. But not all Zelarians were content with their empire's rule. A faction led by a charismatic Zelarian general named Rylian had grown disillusioned with the empire's leadership. They had watched from the sidelines as the Vornik mocked humanity, and they had begun to see the cracks in their own empire's power. Rylian had heard of the humans' victory, and he saw an opportunity. The Zelarian Empire had grown complacent, and many of its leaders were corrupt. Rylian and his followers wanted change, and they believed that humanity, despite their small size, could be the key to that change. They approached Elias with an offer, an alliance. In exchange for the Eclipse device and support in their own fight against the Zelarian elite, they would lend their forces to humanity's cause. Elias was cautious. The Zelarians had been one of the species that had mocked humanity most openly, and their offer seemed too good to be true. But he knew that the road ahead would require allies, even ones that came with complications. After careful consideration, he agreed to the alliance. Together, they would build a force capable of challenging the galaxy's most powerful empires. With the Zelarians on their side, the coalition began to grow. The Vornik were still reeling from their defeat, but they would not stay down for long. Elias knew that time was running out. The alien empires would begin to unite against humanity and its growing allies. They would not allow a small, insignificant species to challenge their power without retaliation. The next phase of humanity's plan was set into motion. The Eclipse device would allow them to strike quickly and without warning, but they would need to act fast before the galaxy's powers could fully respond. Elias and his team began preparing for a new offensive. The target was a Vornik stronghold, deep within their empire, that controlled a key supply line to the rest of their military forces. If humanity and its allies could take control of this stronghold, it would be a crippling blow to the Vornik's ability to wage war. The mission was risky. The Vornik had fortified the stronghold with some of their most advanced weapons, and the area was heavily defended. But Elias knew that if they could strike with precision and speed, they could overcome the odds. The coalition forces, now including humans, Zelarians, and several smaller alien factions, began to prepare for the mission. Each species brought its own strengths to the table. The Zelarians provided advanced weapons and strategies, while humanity's ingenuity and the sheer will to fight drove the team forward. As the coalition's forces set off toward the Vornik stronghold, Elias couldn't help but feel the weight of what was at stake. If they succeeded, it would be a turning point in the war. It would show the galaxy that humanity was no longer a weak, insignificant species. But failure would mean disaster. The Vornik would retaliate, and the alliance could crumble under the pressure. The journey was long and difficult. The human ships, now equipped with the Eclipse device, moved quickly and silently through the galaxy. Their destination was a heavily defended Vornik world, a planet surrounded by fleets of warships and a dense network of defensive systems. But humanity's new weapon, combined with the bravery of their allies, gave them a fighting chance. As the coalition fleet arrived at the outskirts of the Vornik stronghold, the tension was palpable. The fleet would need to break through the enemy's defenses and make their way to the surface before the Vornik could respond. Elias' heart raced as he watched the screens in the command center. The Eclipse device had already been activated, and the ships were preparing to make their first jump. The seconds seemed to stretch into eternity as the fleet jumped, moving faster than any enemy could anticipate. The Vornik never saw it coming. The ships appeared out of nowhere, right in the heart of the stronghold's defenses. The human and Zelarian forces launched their attack with surgical precision, overwhelming the Vornik before they could mount a proper defense. The battle was fierce. The Vornik, though stunned by the unexpected assault, fought back with everything they had. The coalition's forces, however, had the advantage. They had the element of surprise, and they were fighting for their survival. Humans, Zelarians, and their allies fought side by side, pushing the Vornik back and taking control of the stronghold. Elias stood on the command bridge, watching as the battle unfolded. The sound of explosions and gunfire echoed through the ship's hull, but Elias remained calm. He had seen many battles, but this one was different. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for. If they could hold the stronghold, it would signal to the galaxy that humanity was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a new future, one where they had a place among the stars. As the final Vornic forces were defeated and the stronghold was secured, Elias couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Humanity had taken a step toward its rightful place in the galaxy. The victory wasn't just about the strategic importance of the stronghold. It was about proving that humanity was no longer a species to be mocked. It was about showing the galaxy that they could stand tall, side by side with their allies and win. But Elias knew that this was just the beginning. The alien empires would not rest. They would retaliate and they would fight to maintain their control over the galaxy. The road ahead would be long and the stakes would only rise higher. But for the first time in history, humanity was no longer on the defensive. They were standing tall, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The galaxy would never view humanity the same way again. The victory over the Vornic stronghold had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. News of humanity's success spread quickly, and for the first time in a long while, the alien empires began to reconsider their previous assumptions about Earth. The once dismissed human race had not only survived, but had proven itself capable of striking at the heart of a major galactic power. The Vornic were not the only ones who had underestimated humanity. Now, the rest of the galaxy had no choice but to take notice. But while the victory was celebrated by humanity and its new allies, Elias Kincaid knew that the real battle was far from over. The Vornic would not allow themselves to be humiliated so easily. They would regroup, and when they did, they would come back stronger. The other alien empires, the Zelarians, the Harkali, and the others, would soon realize that their time to dominate was coming to an end. Elias sat in the command center of the human fleet, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. His team of military strategists, engineers, and diplomats had been working tirelessly to prepare for the next phase of the war. The Eclipse device had given humanity the edge in terms of mobility and surprise, but they would need more than that to win. They needed allies, and they needed a plan that would ensure humanity's survival against the combined might of the alien empires. The first step was to solidify the alliances they had already made. The Zelarians, who had joined humanity's cause out of their own dissatisfaction with their empire's leadership, were proving to be valuable allies. Their advanced technology and battle strategies had helped turn the tide in several key skirmishes. However, Elias knew that the Zelarians could not be fully trusted. Their pride ran deep, and it was only a matter of time before they began to question their role in the coalition. Still, for now, they were necessary. Humanity's other allies were smaller factions, species who had suffered under the rule of the larger galactic empires. Many had never before known the power to fight back, but humanity's boldness had inspired them. Together, they formed a loose but growing alliance, one that would be crucial in the battles to come. Elias knew that if they were to succeed, they would need to find more like-minded species, ones who wanted to break free from the chains of the galaxy's ruling powers. As the coalition's forces regrouped, Elias and his team prepared for the next major offensive. They had learned from their previous successes, and now they were ready to face the Vornic again. The target was another vital stronghold in Vornic-controlled space. This time, however, it would not be a surprise attack. They would have to confront the Vornic directly, head-on. The Vornic had been expecting retaliation, and they had fortified their position. It would be a tough battle, but Elias was confident that humanity had the strength to win. The strategy was simple, yet risky. They would use the Eclipse device to get as close as possible to the Vornic stronghold, but they would need to maintain stealth and avoid detection until the last possible moment. Once they reached the heart of the stronghold, they would launch a full-scale assault, with all of humanity's allies working together to overwhelm the Vornic's defenses. The goal was to strike decisively, breaking the Vornic's hold on the sector and forcing them into retreat. The plan was set into motion, and the coalition fleet began its journey toward the Vornic stronghold. Elias knew that this would be the most dangerous mission they had ever undertaken. There would be no second chances, no time to regroup. The fate of humanity's future in the galaxy rested on the success of this mission. As the fleet traveled through space, Elias took a moment to reflect on how far humanity had come. Just a few months ago, they had been a mocked, insignificant species. Now they were on the verge of challenging the greatest galactic powers. It was a daunting thought, but it also filled him with a sense of pride. The humans had proven that they were capable of great things when pushed to their limits. They had faced overwhelming odds and come out victorious, and they would do it again. The final approach to the Vornik stronghold was tense. The fleet had entered Vornik-controlled space, and the ship's sensors were picking up strange readings. The Vornik were ready. They had reinforced their defenses and were preparing for the worst. Ilya's heart raced as he watched the displays, knowing that they were only moments away from entering the heart of the enemy's territory. Then, the moment came. With a flash, the fleet activated the Eclipse device and jumped directly into the Vornik stronghold's space. The attack was swift, but the Vornik were prepared. Their fleets moved into position quickly, and the battle began. The air crackled with energy as laser blasts and missiles flew through space. The Vornik, though surprised by the suddenness of the attack, fought back with all their might. Their ships were powerful, but they were no match for the combined forces of humanity and its allies. The battle raged on for hours, with both sides exchanging blows. Humanity's forces were small compared to the Vornik, but they fought with determination, using their mobility and strategy to outmaneuver their enemies. The Zelarians proved to be valuable assets, their advanced weapons and tactics creating openings for the human ships to exploit. The smaller alien factions fought bravely alongside the humans, their own desperation for freedom fueling their strength. In the midst of the chaos, Ilya stood at the helm of his flagship, coordinating the assault. His voice was calm, but inside his thoughts raced. He knew that the outcome of this battle would determine whether humanity would remain a force in the galaxy or be crushed under the boot of the Vornik. But he also knew that they had come too far to fail. Humanity's will to survive, to fight for their place among the stars, would be their greatest weapon. As the hours passed, the tide of the battle slowly began to turn in humanity's favor. The Vornik, though powerful, had underestimated the strength of their enemies. With each passing moment, the Vornik stronghold grew weaker, their defenses faltering. And then, with a final, decisive blow, the stronghold fell. The Vornik were forced to retreat, leaving behind a shattered military and a galaxy that had been forever changed. Ilias and his team stood in silence as the news of their victory spread. The Vornik had been defeated, and humanity had taken another giant step toward securing its place in the galaxy. The galaxy was no longer a place of domination and control. It was a place of struggle, of alliances, of constant challenges. And humanity had proven that it was ready to face those challenges, no matter the cost. As the coalition celebrated their hard-fought victory, Ilias knew that the war was far from over. The Vornik would regroup, and the other alien empires would soon come to their defense. But for the first time, humanity had shown that it was not to be underestimated. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. Humanity was no longer weak. They had proven themselves as a force to be reckoned with. And this was only the beginning. The victory over the Vornik stronghold had been a turning point for humanity, but Ilias Kincaid knew the galaxy would not sit back and accept this new order without a fight. The Vornik had retreated, but they were not defeated. They would regroup, rebuild, and come back stronger. The other alien empires, the Zelarians, the Harkali, and the others, would soon unite, fearing what humanity could do if they were left unchecked. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been earned, but the fight for it was far from over. As the coalition's forces gathered to celebrate their victory, Ilias remained focused. The success of the battle had sent a message, but that was just the beginning. The galaxy's power structures were shaken, but Ilias knew that shaking them was not enough. The coalition had to be strong enough to survive the inevitable retaliation that would come, and for that, they needed more than just military strength. They needed unity. Humanity's alliances had grown, but they were still fragile. The Zelarians had joined the fight out of necessity, but their pride was a constant threat. Ilias had already seen signs of discord within their ranks, as some Zelarians began to question their role in the coalition. The smaller factions that had allied with humanity were still uncertain, unsure whether they should continue their fight or return to the safety of their former lives. Ilias stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring out at the stars. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers, opportunities, and uncertainty. But for the first time in history, humanity had a seat at the table. They had proven that they could fight, that they were worthy of being counted among the galaxy's greatest species. But proving themselves once was not enough. They had to do it again and again until the galaxy saw them not as an inferior species, but as equals. The human fleet had been battered in the battle, and though they had won, the damage was not insignificant. Ilias knew that the time had come to focus on rebuilding. The coalition forces needed time to regroup, to rest, and to refocus. The Vornik would be planning their next move, and when they did, humanity would have to be ready. As the fleet made its way back to Earth, Ilias met with his key advisors. The human military, the Zellarians, and the smaller alien factions were all present. The mood was cautious but hopeful. They had achieved something no one thought possible, but they had also made many enemies. The path ahead would not be easy. "We've made a statement," Ilias said, his voice steady, "but this war is far from over. The Vornik, the Zellarians, and all the others will not give up their power easily. We've won a battle, but the true test will be keeping our position." The room was silent for a moment as everyone considered his words. The reality of the situation was clear. They had won a significant victory, but they were still a long way from securing peace in the galaxy. The coalition had been built on the premise of mutual survival, but that did not mean it was strong enough to withstand the forces that would inevitably try to tear it apart. "We need to solidify our alliances," Ilias continued. "We cannot let the Zellarians or the other factions question their loyalty. We need to give them something to believe in, something to fight for. If we want to build a new order in this galaxy, it has to be one that everyone can be a part of." One of the Zellarian leaders, General Rylian, spoke up. "And what if the Zellarians do not agree? What if they decide it is time for them to reclaim their dominance?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. The Zellarians, despite their alliance with humanity, had their own ambitions. Ilias looked directly at him. "Then we fight. We don't let anyone dictate what our future will be, but we also build. We build something stronger than any empire or ruling class. We build a galaxy of equals." Rylian's gaze lingered on Ilias for a moment before he nodded. "I agree. The Zellarians have grown complacent in their power. Perhaps it is time for a change." The conversation continued as the advisors discussed their next steps. They would need to strengthen their forces, not just militarily, but diplomatically as well. It was time to reach out to more species, to find others who shared their vision of a galaxy free from oppression. Ilias knew that this was the only way forward. Humanity had fought for their place, but they could not sustain their newfound position through force alone. They needed a coalition built on trust, mutual respect, and a shared goal. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the people were preparing for the next phase of humanity's journey. The victory over the Vornik had sparked a surge of pride and determination. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were not weak, not insignificant, and certainly not something to be ignored. But Ilias knew that Earth could not afford to return to the safety of its homeworld and remain isolated. They had to reach out, they had to be part of the greater galaxy, and they had to continue the fight for their place. As the fleet returned to Earth, Ilias received a message from the leaders of the smaller factions that had joined humanity's cause. They wanted to meet. They had seen what humanity had accomplished, and they wanted to know if humanity's offer of a new order in the galaxy was real. Ilias knew that this meeting would be crucial. If humanity could secure these new alliances, they would have the foundation to truly change the galaxy. The meeting took place on Earth, in a vast hall that had been prepared for the occasion. Leaders from the smaller factions arrived, each one representing a different species, each one carrying their own fears and hopes for the future. Ilias stood at the head of the table, surrounded by his trusted advisors and military leaders. He addressed the room with calm confidence. "We've proven that humanity can fight, but it's not enough to fight. We need to build. We need to create a future where every species, no matter how small, has a voice, a place. The galaxy can no longer be ruled by a few powerful empires. It has to be a place where all species have the freedom to live, to grow, and to thrive. If we stand together, we can make that happen." The room was silent for a moment as the leaders of the smaller factions considered his words. Then, one by one, they spoke. They saw the truth in Ilias' words. Humanity was no longer just a small, insignificant species. They had earned their place at the table, and now they were ready to fight for a future that included everyone. By the end of the meeting, the coalition had expanded. New species had joined the cause, bringing with them their technology, their knowledge, and their commitment to a new future. Elias knew that the battle was far from over, but humanity had made its mark. The galaxy would never see them as weak again. As the meeting concluded, Elias stood at the window looking out at the stars. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, humanity had a chance. They had proven themselves, not through force alone, but through determination, resilience, and the strength to stand up for what they believed in. The galaxy had mocked humanity once, but now it would have to reckon with them.